Welcome to your Tuesday edition of FreightWaves Now. I got some really exciting information for you from our favorite Donny Gilbert. But first, let's talk to Nick Austin with the weather.
Welcome to FreightWaves Weather, your Tuesday edition. I'm FreightWaves meteorologist Nick Austin. Hope you had a good Monday. We got some really messy weather in some parts of the United States today in several different regions. We're talking about rainy weather, we have snowy weather out there, and we have really windy weather. So lots of different types of weather that truckers will run into today and where they will have problems. We're talking about probably minor to maybe moderate delays in some areas, so no major disruptions, but main thing is going to be driver safety through a lot of these regions. So the first area is going to be the eastern United States, anywhere from Florida all the way up into New England from this morning really all the way through the end of the day and into the evening. We're talking about a cold front with more showers, thunderstorms, possibly a few severe thunderstorms here and there. This system isn't really going to be as strong as it was when it moved through Texas and the Dallas area a couple days ago, where it produced tornadoes on Sunday night. But there could be some isolated tornadoes, some areas of intense winds along the I-95 and the I-81 corridors today, and also into this evening. Possibly some heavy rain, but probably not a lot of flash flooding. But overall, just a lot of wet and possibly some stormy weather for drivers up and down the East Coast, especially this afternoon and this evening. And then that's finally going to wind down and dry out up in the Northeast during the day tomorrow on Wednesday for the afternoon and evening, and it'll start drying out. Next, we're going to go into the Midwest. We have high wind warnings and also high wind watches up. A lot of really gusty winds out of the Northwest, possibly at 40 to 50 miles per hour from Iowa all the way up into Minnesota, Milwaukee metro area, just north of Chicago, and then along the I-29 corridor from the eastern parts of the Dakotas down into Nebraska. So over a pretty large area here, the crosswinds are going to be really strong. Not safe for deadheading, that's for sure. It's going to be really risky, and there's that chance for blowovers if you do have to drive empty vans through this area. But the best thing would be to do is try and go around it if you can. Unless you have a full load, then you'll probably be okay. Last, we're going to go further out west still. This is right here near the Idaho-Montana border, and then this area in the kind of teal color over here. It's kind of faint, but you can kind of make it out. This is right near central Montana, right along the mountains there before you hit the plains of Montana. Those two areas are going to see some heavy snow. Here near the Idaho border, it'll be early in the day today into the early afternoon, local time out there, with some heavy wet snow and just a lot of slick roads, especially US 12 and through Lolo Pass. And then later in the day and into tonight, the heavy snow will, as it fades over there, the heavy snow will start falling right here in the mountains of Montana right before you hit the plains. So right on the cusp there on the border of western and central Montana, Kings Hill Pass and the roads around that area, mainly in the high elevations above about 4,000 or 5,000 feet. That's where the snow will be heavy there for tonight. That's what you need to know about your weather for your Tuesday. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel to get all of our FreightWaves videos, and have a great day and be careful out there.
Welcome to your Tuesday edition of the Carrier Update, sponsored by Powerfleet. My name is Kyle Cunningham. Let's talk about volumes all across the country. Look at this tree map behind me. United States of America long haul outbound tender volume index up 1.5%, stealing a little away from the city outbound volume. So if you're running local stuff, a little volume turned down, but running long haul, if that's you, you're gonna have a little bit of advantage. Now, in terms of the national volume, still a little under 10,000, nothing to get concerned of yet. Let's talk about some markets across the country. Greensboro, North Carolina, Raleigh, North Carolina, frozen freight looking pretty good outside of where it was before. Coming both up underneath 5% and up to 8.2%. These markets are going to be showing you favorability in terms of outbound rejection. So it's not going to be the strongest rate you've ever seen, but understand that today and possibly for the next few days, you're going to have more leverage than you did previously. Now, looking at outbound versus inbound, the outbound down here, these little red squares versus the big green squares, a lot more inbound capacity into both these markets. So do take a note of that. In terms of cover time, outbound tender lead time for reefer freight in both these markets, Raleigh at 4.1, Greensboro at 3.3. Moving over to the middle of the country, Arkansas, Fayetteville, and Little Rock. Big moves up in regards to head haul, still underneath 0 for both of these, okay? So that's indicating there's still a little more inbound competition, but as it stands, it's getting closer to being balanced. Taking a look at outbound rejections for Fayetteville, up 35% to 18. Little Rock floating right about 19% rejection. So about 1 in every 5 tenders in both these markets are being rejected, indicating there's a lot of options out there for you. Now let's take a look and see what's going on in El Paso. El Paso, talk about this one a lot. It's up and down, currently trending down. As it gets down lower, that's indicating that more trucks are coming into the market. Once it starts heading back up again, there's going to be a capacity crunch. So watch El Paso. I'll keep you updated on it. As the head haul stands, still a little bit above 0, but trending way down, indicating that capacity is coming in. These two right here complement each other perfectly. As always, thanks for watching your carrier update. We'll see you tomorrow. Welcome to your Tuesday edition of the Brokerage Update. We're here again with Donny Gilbert talking about some very interesting stuff about volume conditions across the country. Tell us what's going on.
Well, today I brought us our outbound national tender volume index chart. And the reason we're looking at this is because we index this around 10,000. 10,000 is a good, intermediate market, and we always want to be at 10,000 or above. Well, last week we dropped down below 10,000 again, and right now we're at 98.16. So we kind of watched it last week, kind of dip down and dip down and dip down, but finally today we kind of hit, rock bottom yesterday, it looked like, hopefully, and we kind of came up a little bit, 16 points. So I'm excited at least that it's now stopped going down and at least started back up. And of course that's had a tremendous effect on the rates. Looking over at our inbound or outbound reefer and drive-in tender rejection rates on a national level, here we see in the blue line here, this is our reefer. We see reefer's gone down and starting to kind of come back up a little bit to 12.28%. 12.28% is above 10%. I like to see the rejection rates above 10%. So reefer, even though it has dropped down, it's still holding a relatively strong tender rejection rate across the average for the U.S. Now drive-in's a different story. Drive-in has come down and it's dropped all the way down to 3.98%. That's a very, very weak drive-in tender rejection rate. And that has a lot to do with these volumes that have gone down below the 10,000 because 75–80% of our market is drive-in freight. So reefer still holding a little bit strong, drive-in has kind of dropped down and below the 4% market. Not what we want to see. So what we need to look at right now is, definitely jump in and look at your tender rejection maps. Here we look at across the U.S. We see this area here in the Midwest here. These are where tender rejection rates are still fairly strong. You see a lot deeper blues. You see blues kind of picking up here through the Southeast, Alabama, North and South Carolina. These are markets, if you're a broker, you need to look in and find where the volatility is. Even though national tender rejection averages are 3.98%, there are still other markets out there that are holding strong, but you have to dig in. You have to go through all the 135 markets and find these. Today I was looking at Cedar Rapids. If we look at Cedar Rapids here, it's kind of the opposite of what we saw in the national tender rejection indexes. Here we have reefer that's actually dropped down. It was upwards of over 17% and it's dropped down to 6.58%. So here we have reefers actually trending downward and they've gone down below 7%. On the other hand, we have drive-in tender rejection rates that were down around 10, 11, 12%, and they've come all the way up to 19%, and they're still trending upwards. So this is what you need to look for. This is a smaller market, but still, we're looking for the volatility. We see where tender rejection rates are trending upwards.
And it's not bad. That's 1 out of every 5 tenders that go out that are getting rejected. So that's indicating some real strength there in terms of optionality.
Yeah. And the biggest issue on this market is your mid-haul lane. Right now, mid-haul lane, the tender rejection rates have jumped up over 30%. So here, your mid-haul is a lot of those loads that'll take you from Iowa into the Midwest, which normally would carry probably a fairly low contract rate because that's where carriers want to go. They want to get into Chicago, Indianapolis, or maybe even Ohio. So here they've cut a very low contracted rate on these lanes. And now when capacity's tightened up, these are the ones that are getting rejected, and these rates have gone up or a lot higher than what the contracted rates are, and that's why we see a 30% tender rejection rate. Your tweener haul and your long haul are all up to 15%. So a lot of these lanes coming out of Iowa right now carrying a higher tender rejection rate. So this is the information that you need to dig in your maps, and this is what you need to find. A lot easier way to find these, we have our most volatile markets table. And you can go in here and it lists all the indexes that are the most important to us. Outbound volumes, outbound tender rejection rates, your head haul, and your tender lead times. And we highlight once you break, one standard deviation or two standard deviation, depending on how much has gone out of its normal average over a year. We start highlighting, letting you know, is it a moderate increase or is it a strong increase? Is it a moderate decrease or a strong decrease? So you're looking here in the middle and you see Cedar Rapids, Iowa. It's got a moderate increase on our outbound tender volume or tender reject index. And this is what I go by and look it up. I start looking into these markets that have the greens to see which one are the most volatile markets and see what I want to pick to choose today.
Donny, absolutely fantastic perspective yet again. The freight's always going to roll, and that's why it's important to pay attention to your brokerage update every single day. Thanks, Donny. We'll see you tomorrow.
Well, we have a special shipper update on FreightWaves Now today. Steve Ferreira, he is the CEO of Ocean Audit. He joins me. Steve, thanks for coming here to Chattanooga. Talk about what is Ocean Audit for our viewers out there who don't know what this is.
Emily, thanks for having me. One of the things that I did with Ocean Audit, creating it some 25 years ago, is I wanted to have a platform for CEOs, CFOs to recover overpaid ocean freight. I come from the carrier industry myself. I've lived in Hong Kong, China, Prague, and in my experience, 12 to 15% of all ocean invoices are defective, and clients just do not do a proper job recovering those expenses. So Ocean Audit, in summary, is a contingency-based audit company that provides refund recoveries to the import-export community. Currently, we're proud to have 15 of the Fortune 100 as clients.
So the big thing right now are the Chinese tariffs. We've been talking about the trade war for more than a year, and there doesn't really seem to be an end in sight. And so a lot of supply chain and financial leaders are having to think of ways to help with these expenses. What are some ways and major themes, I would say, that shippers are using to invoke cost control discipline when it comes to the tariffs?
Sure. We've put a couple on the screen, and I think a couple that are really relevant, Emily, are the whole concept of forward loading. Some clients are trying to push back on the tariffs by either re-engineering or retooling the products or having them come from a third country, and then certainly try to find a way to recover funds that can help offset the tariffs. And I prepared a few examples for the audience to see today with Walmart and Target. I think one of the things that's really interesting about Walmart as an example, you can see here they made a really big move in August and September to forward load or bring us as many containers as possible before the tariffs hit. But now you can see come October that the numbers on the containers have severely diminished because their warehouses are full and they've brought in what they wanted to bring in. Now, that was Walmart's strategy. If you look at Target's strategy, 85% of Target's containers come in from China. And so Target took a contrarian strategy where they asked their vendors to hold the price levels, and therefore you can see they were relatively flat in July and August, and then they did take a big hit downward, maybe even more severe than Walmart. Now, one of the reasons why is that Target's chief merchandising officer asked the Chinese vendors to hold the price levels on the actual products coming out of China. I don't know if that was successful because the radical plummet of Target's September and October containers seems to indicate that maybe Target wasn't able to hold the prices as best they were able to, as they had planned.
You mentioned ocean recovery. I know Ocean Audit, your company, specializes in that. Talk about what ocean recovery is and how you could help with that.
Well, sure. Over 15% of ocean freight has a correctable defect. There's a 3-year federal law where clients can go back and recover ocean freight refunds. And typically, most clients can achieve a 1% return on their total 3-year sea freight spend. Now, if you look at a client like Target, although duties and China tariffs are different than ocean freight recovery, one of the things that I bridged as a thought leader on the process is to help clients like Target offset a little bit of the tariff. So if you take Target as an example, it's possible that with their spend, they could achieve potentially a $3 million recovery on ocean freight refunds, which they can then use to bump up against offsetting their China tariffs. So I think a way to think of it for the readers is taking the tariffs from, say, a 10% level down to a more reasonable yet high, like 9.7% level. So we think that that's one of the really big advantages that Ocean Audit's been able to give clients in this particular 301 tariff season.
You showed a great example with Target. You mentioned it a little bit ago. Before we get to the IMO 2020, I thought this was interesting. If the Chinese manufacturers aren't willing to work with people to offset some of the costs, what are some other ways they can offset these costs? And when we talk about costs, do we have any any idea what these costs of these tariffs actually are?
Well, the cost of the tariffs are billions, but one of the things that's been really advantageous to a lot of the clients, a lot of the importers, and Target's done it to a little extent, but there have been some really remarkable stories in the trade where clients have moved entire supply chains out of China to places like Vietnam, Cambodia, West Asia, India, Pakistan. And so it does take a long time to read the tea leaves in terms of political and economic ramifications about how to move those supply chains. But when you get into the position of a Target where you're really locked into China, you have to really start to look at cost cutting in other ways. Reduced ocean freight refunds, other transactional measures where perhaps you give more volume to the Chinese manufacturers to leverage the pricing downstream.
Well, obviously, we'll be talking about the trade war for a while, but also looking to the horizon. We've been talking here at FreightWaves about IMO 2020 a lot. Shippers and, exporters, and importers need to be talking about this. The sooner the better, because it's coming. Talk about that.
It's a remarkable subject, and it's one that's just cascading on top of the Chinese tariff issue. Most experts, myself included, tend to think that IMO 2020 come January is going to result in 5 to 7% to 9% increases in ocean freight. The one thing that's remarkable about IMO 2020 is there's no set parameters in terms of how it will be executed, how the invoicing will be, how the pricing will be. Now, I know from experience as a leader in the trade that we're going to see months and months of disjointed invoices, overpayments, overcharges, and it's going to wreak havoc on clients' AP, finance, and control and supply chain velocity and volatility and payment processes. So it's something really your audience should look out for in terms of better cost controls.
And I know you had another slide to go with this, and you were talking about the BCO invoice accuracy. Talk about that.
Right, I think that one of the things about BCO invoice accuracy, Emily, is that typically for every 100 invoices, 10 have an overcharge. Clients only catch 5 on their own accord. That means 5 will reside in that bank account of the NVOCC or the steamship line forever until some corrective action's been put into place. So people like myself and other leaders in auditing would attempt to recover these overcharges to repatriate our clients' treasury with funds that properly belong to them. But I think one of the things about IMO 2020, you should potentially looking at a $10 to $15 billion increase in freight costs across the board in the Trans-Pacific alone.
Yeah, this is big, and this is something we've been talking about here at FreightWaves. We'll continue to talk about IMO 2020. Steve, thank you again for joining us.
It's my pleasure.
Of course, you're watching on YouTube, so hit subscribe. Also follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. We hope everyone has a great Tuesday.